There's a particular kind of stuck that doesn't look like crisis from the outside. No dramatic collapse, no visible breaking point, just a quiet heaviness, days that blur together, a version of your life that used to feel like yours, now feeling slightly borrowed, slightly too tight, like a sweater you've outgrown but haven't noticed yet. Maybe you're there right now, going through the motions, work, routines, relationships, everything technically fine, and yet something underneath feels flat, uncertain, like you're waiting for a sign that hasn't come, or waiting to feel like yourself again without knowing when you stopped. If that sounds familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not failing. You are not behind. You are not broken. Because here's the paradox almost no one tells you. The very stillness that feels like stagnation is very often the exact moment right before everything changes. Carl Jung, one of psychology's most profound minds, noticed something remarkable about the human experience of transformation. He observed a specific pattern, a stage that shows up almost without exception right before someone's life shifts into something better, truer, more aligned. And the strange part is, almost no one recognizes this stage while they're living through it. It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like falling apart. Which means, right now, if you're in a season that feels uncertain, stalled, even a little lost, you might actually be standing closer to your next chapter than you realize. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what this moment looks like, and more importantly, what it feels like from the inside, so that the next time it arrives, or if it's already here, you won't panic, you won't spiral into thinking something's wrong with you. You'll recognize it for what it actually is. So stay with me, because what feels like silence right now might just be the pause before something real begins. It felt like your own private struggle a moment ago, didn't it? Something only you were going through, quietly, behind a mostly fine exterior. But here's the strange comfort in what comes next. A psychologist who lived over a century ago mapped this exact experience in careful detail long before you were born. Carl Jung spent years studying not just the mind, but the process of transformation itself, how people actually change at the deepest level. And in doing so, he borrowed a word from an unlikely place, alchemy, the ancient symbolic practice of turning base metal into gold. Jung wasn't interested in literal alchemy, but he was fascinated by what it represented psychologically. And the very first stage of that process, he noted, was called nigredo, the blackening, the dissolving, the necessary darkness before anything golden could emerge. Think of a caterpillar. We love the story of the butterfly, the beauty, the wings, the transformation, but we tend to skip over what actually happens inside the cocoon. It's not a gentle upgrade. The caterpillar doesn't simply grow wings while staying mostly intact. It completely breaks down first, dissolving into something formless, almost unrecognizable, a kind of biological goo, before it can reorganize into something new. There is no butterfly without that total dissolution first. Jung believed the same was true for us, psychologically. Before real transformation, before someone steps into a truer, more aligned version of themselves, there is almost always a period that feels like falling apart. Confusion about who you are, discomfort in roles that used to fit, a quiet, disorienting sense of losing your grip on the identity you built your life around. And here's what made Jung's perspective so radically compassionate, especially for a psychologist of his time. He didn't see this stage as failure. He didn't see it as something to fix quickly or push past. He saw it as necessary groundwork, not a detour to your growth, the actual beginning of it. Which means if you're in a season right now that feels like dissolving, where old certainties don't hold anymore, where you don't quite recognize the shape of your own life, you're not regressing. You may be exactly where transformation always begins. But to really understand this stage, we need to talk about what it actually looks like when it's happening to you, because it rarely announces itself with clarity.
it usually just feels like something quietly stops fitting. That's the pattern Jung mapped in theory. But let's talk about what it actually feels like when it's happening to you, because it rarely announces itself with clarity. It usually just feels like something quietly stops fitting. Here's the one thing that always happens first, right before a real chapter turns. The old identity begins to collapse. Not dramatically, usually, not all at once. It's subtler than that. A slow unraveling of the roles, routines, beliefs, and relationships that used to feel like you, and now feel strangely hollow, or heavy, or wrong in a way you can't quite explain. Maybe it's a job you used to be proud of, one that gave you identity, structure, a sense of who you were in the world, and now, without anything changing on paper, it feels unbearable. Sitting at your desk feels different. The ambition that used to drive you has gone quiet, and in its place is a question you can't ignore anymore. Is this actually still me? Or maybe it's a relationship. Nothing dramatic has happened. No betrayal, no obvious ending, but conversations that used to feel easy now feel like performance. You find yourself quietly wondering when you started editing yourself to keep the peace, and whether the version of you in that relationship is one you even recognize anymore. Or maybe it's simpler and somehow harder than either of those. Maybe it's just you, the version of yourself you built years ago, the one who had certain beliefs, certain dreams, a certain way of moving through the world, and lately none of it fits the way it used to. You look at old goals and feel nothing. You look at your own personality traits, the ones people compliment you on, and quietly wonder if they're even true anymore, or just habits you've been performing so long you forgot they were a choice. If any of this feels familiar, that quiet, disorienting sense of outgrowing your own life before you've built the next one, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken, and you are not making a mistake. You're not failing at being yourself. You're in the exact stage Jung described, the one that almost always comes first. Because here's the reframe that changes everything. This discomfort is not a setback, it's a signal. It's not evidence that something has gone wrong with you, it's evidence that something in you has finally been grown out of the container it's been living in. The job, the relationship, the identity, these aren't necessarily bad. They're just too small now for who you're becoming. And that mismatch, that friction, is exactly what dissolving feels like from the inside. This is important to sit with, because most people, when they feel this collapse beginning, panic. They assume something is wrong with them, and they either force themselves back into the old shape or spiral into fear about what it means. But if this really is a signal, not a setback, we have to be honest about something else too, because naming this pattern is one thing, living inside it day after day is another feeling entirely. Naming it is one thing, but let's be honest about how deeply uncomfortable this stage actually feels, because understanding the theory doesn't automatically make the experience gentle. This stage is disorienting in a very specific way. It takes away your clarity right when you want it most. You don't get a map. You don't get reassurance that this is temporary or that it's leading somewhere good. You just get the not knowing. Old answers stop working, and new ones haven't arrived yet. You ask yourself what you want, what you believe, who you even are underneath all the roles you built your life around, and instead of an answer, there's just static, quiet confusion where certainty lived. And into that confusion creeps something almost all of us know too well: comparison. You scroll past someone your age who seems to have it figured out, the career, the relationship, the sense of direction, and something in you tightens. Why do they seem so sure of themselves, and I can't barely explain what I'm feeling right now? It's easy in this stage to mistake your dissolving for falling behind, to look at your own uncertainty and assume it means something is wrong with you specifically, instead of understanding it as part of a process almost everyone eventually walks through, quietly, in their own way. Here's a metaphor that might make this easier to hold. Imagine renovating a house. Before anything beautiful can be built, walls have to come down, wiring gets exposed, dust settles everywhere. For a while, the house is genuinely, undeniably a mess, worse to look at than before you started. If you walked into that house mid-renovation without knowing what was coming next, you might panic. You might think, this was a mistake. This is worse than before. But anyone who's ever renovated anything knows the mess isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of construction. You cannot build something new around walls that are still standing. Your identity works the same way. The confusion, the self-doubt, the quiet grief for a version of yourself that no longer fits, that's not the walls falling on you. That's the necessary demolition before the new structure goes up. If you're in this stage right now, feeling lost, feeling behind, quietly wondering if everyone else got some manual for adulthood that you missed, I want you to know something clearly. You're not the only one sitting in this